Before we get into the promised explanation of the August 6th operation of 1585, we get into the start of Liber Resurrectionis Praga Aprilis 30th Pactum Seu Voidis Septisme 1586 Threbon Octobre 14th Venemus e September 14 1586 in Mayo 29th Exile Decretum contra nos exis a caser rod in Augusto 8th Reversiones Permissio de Rosenbergio obtenent ad sua veneamus miraculum eo factum memorandum in perpetuum. According to Church and Faithful Relation, what passed for many years between Dr. John Dee and some spirits, 1659. As Edward Kelly stood at the end of the gallery by his chamber, looking over into the vineyard, he seemed to see the little man, the gardener, in all manner of behavior and apparel, who is the chief workman or overseer of Mr. Carpio, his workman, in the same vineyard. And as a side note, which has nothing to do with this, Nazi is a Hebrew word for overseer, and it was used by a slur before Hitler came to power, but we're getting an opportunity to use it here, right? But you know, it was you know, it's a slur that you shouldn't use. You know, it was used by the people on the Russian side, by the way. He seemed very handsomely to prune some of the trees at length. He approached under the wall by Edward Kelly, and holding his face awayward, he said unto him, Quaso dictus domino doctore, quod veniet ad me, and so went away, as it were, cutting here and there the trees very handsomely and at length. Over the cherry tree, it blurs almost to the point where it says, oh yes, the cherry tree, but over the cherry trees by the house on the rock in the garden, he seemed to mount up in a very great pillar of fire. It doesn't say very. Something popped on the screen. Edward Kelly bade his wife to go, and she who was in the garden, she came up and brought him word. Nobody. Edward Kelly then came to me and said, I think there is some wicked spirit that would elude me, and he told and said to me, as is before noted. Then said I will go into the garden, and bid Edward Kelly to come with me. He went down that way which this creature did go, but nothing we saw went into the banqueting house in the vineyard, but that place pleased us. Not so, we went along in the way by the cliffside, and sat down on the bank by the great pile of vine stakes lying at the very south end of the vineyard, and we had not sat there half a quarter of an hour, but I espied under the almond tree, and on the south side of it, being the westwardly almond tree, that is it which is standing on the westwardly side of the straight path which leadeth from the north toward the south in the vineyard. I espied, I say, like a sheet of fair white paper lying tossed to and fro in the wind, I rose and went to it, and, to the praise of God, his truth and power, there I found 3 of my books lying, which were so diligently burnt the 10th day of April last. The 3 books were Enoch's book, the 48 Claves Angelica, and the 3rd was the book of my gathering of the 30 heirs, and entitled Liber Scientia Terrestris Auxilia Victoria. Thereupon, Edward Kelly coming to me, I fell on my knees with great thanks, yielding to the God Almighty, and so did Edward Kelly, whose mind and body were marvelously affected at the sight of said books, having no show or sign that ever they had been in the fire, neither by color or favor, or anything wanting. And after we had set half an hour under the foresaid almond trees, praying God and wondering at the miracle, suddenly appeared by us the self same gardener-like person, but with his face somewhat turned away, and nothing thereof to be judged as of Avi. The custom is, he said, Kelly, follow me. Edward Kelly went, and I sat still, awaiting his return. This gardener went before Edward Kelly, and his feet seemed not to touch the ground by a foot height. And as he went before Edward Kelly, so the doors did seem to open to him, and led him up the great stairs, on the left hand by the vineyard door, and so at his own chamber door, where Edward Kelly hath new study, and then the door going out of that to the stairs opened of itself, and he went up those stairs, and at length brought him to the furnace mouth, where all the books and papers had been burnt the 10th day of this April, and coming thither, there the spiritual creature did seem to set one of his feet on the post on the right hand, without the furnace mouth, without the furnace mouth, and with the other to step to the furnace mouth, and so to reach into the furnace, the bricks being now plucked away, which stopped the mouth of the furnace, all saving 1 brick thick. And as he had reached into the furnace, there appeared a great light, as if there had been a window in the back of the furnace, and also to Edward Kelly the hole, which was not greater than the thickness of a brick unstopped, did seem now more than 3 or 4 bricks thickness wide, and so over his shoulder backward he did reach to Edward Kelly all the rest of the standing books, excepting the book out of which the last action was out, and Francis Pucci his recantation also. To Edward Kelly appeared in the furnace all the rest of the papers which were not as then delivered out. That being done, he bade Edward Kelly to go, and said he should have the rest afterward. He went before it in a little fiery cloud, and Edward Kelly followed, with the books under his arm, all along the gallery, and came down the stairs by Francis Pucci, his chamber door, and then his guide left Edward Kelly, and he brought me the books unto my place under the almond tree. And I forgot about that one. That was an interesting one. So the thing is explained. Nowadays, we wouldn't notice a paper being thrown to the side and all that. We'd probably be like, but a matter of little importance. What they receive as a reward. Yeah, there's so much good paper available that we just don't really consider these things too much. begging the doctor to come to them. First, they've permission to return to Lord Rosenberg. Some prayers being poured forth. Thanksgiving for the miracle of yesterday. What should we do? I guess we'll get into more of that as we see. But okay, the August 6th operation, let's start like totally over. They started around the time of the rising of the sun. Now, people look at particular hours of the clock, and as much as that's important when you're regarding mystical experiences and stuff like that, you would want to regard with the day, divide sunrise to sunset into 12, or some other portion like that, or divide them into watches, much like prayer hours. In the middle, maybe hour of the day or 10 minutes. Outside of that, till, the late afternoon or early morning. And then on, the time towards, towards sunrise or towards sunset, the twilight, the middle of the night. But anyways, so blessed who comes in the name of God, and if you do things, but even more blessed would be of God, right? That you're of those principles, you're enacting that. If you do things in the name of, well, you may not be on the way of God. I've seen some horrible things that people said, or worse, that, they said they were doing it for God, but, but truth can become even more illuminated. You start with knowledge, and then there's more and more wisdom that can be attached to it. The book that's opened, to the world and the universe, the book with 7 seals, and we've seen the, what's the letters for the Enochian seals? Emit Tav? Yeah, those 7 letters, or the letters of the seal. Well, I don't remember the Enochian names of the letters. People make a big deal about that. Oh, I'm going to chant the names of the letters. That works for Mr. Ducat, but I don't think that's necessary. I don't think any of the Golden Dawn stuff is necessary. But it makes sure which letter you're putting down if things are being done individually. And perhaps if you have an experience where you're taught a seal, the entities are going to tell you letter by letter, the names. But, prophecies are going to be unveiled. And arrogance and nonsense, one needs to be cleared of that sort of stuff. The spiritual system is to be virginal. I don't know about curiosity being from the devil. Sons and dogs are certainly symbolic sorts of things. Just like Holy Ghost and Father and Son, and that's, there's symbolic importance to that. We have, so Uriel holds a book that's square in shape, and it has a cover that's fiery red. I've also decided, I don't know why I decided that, but I felt like, the paper that I should have sealing one of my, most people would call it a spell book, and I'm fine with that. Just understand that I don't worship the objects. It's not, I say it and it is, and they're, whatever. There's none of the, some of the stuff that people associate with the word spell. But anyways, I had a reprint of it done and gave it a red cover. So the letter E above the first E, above the second M above the third, E above the fourth, T above the fifth, T above the sixth, A above the seventh, V. Okay, I thought I had to go back and explain that. Oh, but it has degrees sound. So each of them is not just stages, it's like degrees. That's okay. That I didn't get that the first time reading over it. Connecting it to the power of the universe, basically. So it's a representation of the teachings regarding all that, really. Just much like what is said about the Quran. See, just like the Bible as Jesus prophesied, the Israelites, the prophecy was taken from them and their descendants, the spiritual gifts, you could say. Not that no one of northern Semitic descent ever had spiritual experiences. Again, it's just, the prophethood and all that. The angelic speech, translated into Latin to give to Francis Pucci, so he could go over it. Uriel appears sitting in a crystal chair. I'm sure light crystal, as opposed to some of these stories you hear of demons appearing in dark obsidian chairs and all sorts of stuff. But he has some sort of philosophical glass, and the point is that they, that we're assembled a lot more miraculously than we realize. Winds coming together, people being of the sanctuary. Even supposedly the great temple was not rebuilt. It was, one had a private temple in the Enochian practices. In the light with one's fathers. So eventually, if you do this process, then the good that your ancestors encounter in the afterlife, that you, by dealing with your own ignorance and darkness, that's dealt with. You want to be attentive with your voice and put one's emotions into the words that they connect, to your intellect, and you join in the ministry for the highest. By ministry, I don't mean like just some technical church term or something. And the world is completely in the presence of evil, and there's mysteries of judgment, but there's, it's not according to one's fancies. And one doesn't dwell, you become a son of God, you become a son of Satan, or you stay one or the other. It's not, really the thing for either of them to mix. Moses and the other prophets, they weren't supposed to be saying any spiritual teachings unless it was, directly in accord with what, they're supposed to be sharing God's revelation, God's inspiration. And so the inspired deeds and interpretations are therefore all supposed to be linked to that. And that's, of course, an ideal made very explicit in Shia Islam, but in general Islam, that's the idea of the general public, is that our beliefs and our deeds aren't supposed to be except in that we turn to what has been sent. And it even says this, it puts, by the Son of God, see, it mentions that same thing. So you become a son of God if you're one who does not speak his own doctrine, as Jesus said, but the words of, the one who sent him, the Father. People say it's basic Gnosticism or something. Gnosticism didn't start as, the church fathers did try to make Gnosticism all about them, but I would put Gnosticism a few hundred years before Christianity really actually. I don't remember exactly which year, but it was a lot more varied than people tend to think it is. And see, the true disciples only speak continuing that spirit, and it's not just the teachings, there's a function of the teachings. And of course, one of the functions is it establishes a sanctuary, a spreading sanctuary, Dar al-Islam, as some people will call it. But hypocrisy voids people from this understanding. And some people acquire through the scriptures. Some people have their experience that lets them know how foolish and ignorant and whatnot they are, and that perhaps they need to be conservative. And by conservative, I don't mean in this particular set of values. I'm using the term as in, established traditions and of interpretations. For some people, that's best. But more purely, it's the teacher of the multitude that you refer to, those doctrines. And then you can be a lot more varied than what you're going to find in tradition, because as much as tradition can be extremely varied, it's like, well, there's specifics of your own life, and you shouldn't have to contact a doctor of the law to understand the ordinance in spiritual tradition. But you don't want the understanding or the discipline of the outsiders. Again, you have to, have that. And through some of these means can increase divisions and other celestial comforts. And was it Surah 39 talks about the sensual and psychiatric highs, in the Quran, of the believers when they, experience these words. But again, there's a practice that a person takes unto. But you don't, you explain it trying to, not to justify yourselves, but to go after what's right. So cleave to that and understand that word, and then you get in touch with the invisible church. So a lot of this, we're seeing that John Dee and Edward Kelly are being connected to a lineage rather than being freelance sect finders. And you don't want to be contrary to the will of God, but of course, again, people still have their choices. Many people have gone astray through the instigation of the devil, and by the devils, I mean all the demons. The Antichrist is one of these son of the devil people, but the purity of that, much in the same way that Christ is considered son of God, like many other people according to the Bible. But and even some of the spirits of the type that the devil is would have been considered under that term. Of course, we're having Christian doctrines of vicarious atonement, and the actions of Jesus counting for us rather than being models that we can claim perhaps belief in, and something that we can do ourselves. The Bible does support that out of the mouth of Jesus, but again, people focus more on teachings about Jesus than otherwise. But many people, including church leaders, come up with doctrines that are contrary to their very own self. and don't let the sins of other people, don't be like, you know, the sin, the in the spirit of Ananias, um, people have been allowed to remain. It's not that people are struck down the second they do anything wrong. And it's not for them to create a church of themselves. Just allow yourselves to be educated for the most part, and not all. And some dogs turn against you, right? Okay, the wicked monster sits in the holy temple and sins against the highest. That's pretty cool. Some people stretch their hands forth, but really, whatever you do for or against God, it comes back on you even stronger than what you could put forth. But undertake even the smallest amount according to your consciousness as it avails itself. Consider your creation, your redemption, whatever your interpretation of that is, and that you've been left to spiritual comforts and teachings. And they're a congregation unto themselves, but they've been given the opportunity to spread unto others. You have stuff about shaking and cups and holy, 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 Lord God of hosts, that sort of thing. And some direction is towards Francis Pucci specifically, some towards Edward Kelly, some towards John Dee. Always be full of remembrance, always be full of admission of what you really are. Do away with any form of arrogance and nonsense. They're talking to despise the world, very stereotypically Gnostic, but also stereotypically Christian. It's not, and Manichaean and all sorts of other stuff. A lot of paths don't necessarily completely agree with nature, and certainly return to the stuff that you've already done to strengthen its effects. Each soul is dear to God, merciful towards it. I can't read this whole thing, so I'm giving the jest here and there. But just like in the operation of September 6th, all this stuff about, given means to fulfill a promise, the right motivation in the right period, the connecting with the mineral and the plant, even the plant life that is dead. So perhaps, I don't know, the fungus and bugs and whatnot. He who is scourged is going to feel it. So, admit to the hardship that you've gone through. Angelical keys, book of knowledge, and help and earthly victory. So all these spiritual things that you go over, it's not just some Kabbalistic keeping your mind busy sort of stuff. You keep your mind busy with remembrance and good deeds, and your mind and your body, or whatever you want to term your vehicles as. But it's more about what it does, what it is. It's surrender unto God. It's exploring the reality, or whatever it is to you. That's often